This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We speak to you regularly, short business episodes, short private equity episodes, interviews with brilliant business and private equity colleagues, and then what we call body of life episodes. We're joined today by someone who I think is one of the most brilliant, hardworking, outstanding people that I know. But we're joined today by somebody who's had a dual career. He was a tennis pro and a teaching tennis pro. Has been now a teacher of advanced mathematics for 30 plus years, plus runs a large training program, works a ton with emerging young leaders. One of my favorite people. We're joined today by Josh Leighton. Josh, you've managed two different careers over a 30-year period. Brilliant leader, have raised lots of young leaders. Take a moment and introduce yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about Josh Leighton.
Hi, Scott. First of all, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, my name is Josh Leighton. I am currently a teacher at Deerfield High School, and I also am the director of tennis at Northmoor Country Club. I've been at Deerfield for 20 years. I also taught at Palatine High School, and I've been at Northmoor Country Club for the past 17 years. And then I also am the boys varsity tennis coach at Deerfield High School. So I've had a lot of different experiences working with kids, both in the classroom, on the tennis court, and then also having the great opportunity to be able to meet kids as they begin their work life doing something that almost all of them have loved doing since they were little kids.
And so Josh is the unusual sort of mix of advanced math, brilliant tennis teacher, and tennis player, and more than that, sort of a great leader of young people. When you look at young people developing their careers, developing their lives, or young professionals, what advice would you give to young people? And are young people teachable, or are they just so wired a certain way? Give us your thoughts on what advice would you give to people, and how do you see some people evolve that sort of start one way and really grow into wonderful leaders and young people?
I think, Scott's great question. I think that I've been really lucky over the past 17 years as far as working with a lot of these young tennis players. Tennis players themselves oftentimes are really independent because that's how people become pretty good players on the court. And as I've worked with those kids, I've noticed that the best ones are, first of all, always willing to say yes as far as waking up early, getting to an early lesson, willing to stay late, even if it might impinge on a little bit of their, either social or sometimes even family activities. But I've also seen people who have, in a situation where they're giving lessons, listening to advice of people around them and taking that and using that advice and then figuring out some things on their own. We try to give kids advice as far as how they should teach a junior lesson or an adult lesson or a private lesson. And the best ones have a great personality, but also are able to listen to what things we tell them and then really make it their own. And you can see that usually pretty quick in the training process. And, a lot of them have become really fantastic, tennis teachers, instructors. And, I always get a lot of feedback from our members as well.
But more than just on the tennis side, talk about it on the student side, because one of the brilliant young women who was a student of yours in advanced math is a woman that now works at Becker's Healthcare and brilliant. And she was someone that you said when she joined us, you said, Scott, this woman's going to be a superior professional. She was just a fantastic student. How much of it is recognizing that kind of talent and watching that talent continue to have the motivation to develop versus is someone who evolves into a talent? How much of it is sort of nature versus nurture? And I know that's an overstated cliche, but how much of people is just finding the right talent and developing around them versus the other side of it, people that aren't so talented but really grow into greatly talented people?
Right. I think that there definitely are people do each of those. I know that in the classroom, oftentimes when I've taught like honors pre-calculus, which is one of the courses I taught for a long time, I really saw students who struggled for the first time in math early in the semester. And most of them, when they saw that disappointment, were first of all shocked and maybe doubted themselves. And oftentimes I was able to sit down with some of these students one-on-one, talk through their tests, talk through their mistakes, and really see sometimes gradual growth as the semester progressed. And some were able to just get right back on track on the next test and never had another mistake. But almost all of these students, when I talked to them towards the end of the year, really told me that they learned how to study. And what I never realized is that they were actually learned how to study for math, which most people think you either can do math or you don't do math. And so I think that hard work and determination, and again, that independence piece was something that I didn't even realize. Being in a class of 25 kids, I don't always know everything that each kid is doing, but I do believe that they grow over time. And certainly some of them grew quickly and some of them grew throughout the semester. And it was really cool to see.
You've also had some kids, from what I could tell, and I'm thinking of a specific person right now, who are just great, great young people, do everything they're supposed to do, take initiative, seemingly from a young age, could organize everything, take care of everything. They may be very, very good tennis players. There may be other tennis players that compete at the highest level of the state or going to play serious college tennis. But when you find those kids that are magnificent young people, how do you advise them? How do you encourage them? How do you sort of look at that? And do you find those that are already so motivated are sometimes easier to teach and help develop further? How do you sort of look at that?
You know, I think that one of the things that I try to do is really lead by example. And sometimes I don't have as many overt conversations as maybe I should, as I'm working with some of these kids who have taught for me over the past couple of years. And sometimes I'll sit down and talk to them about what I see as far as what they're doing in the workplace, or what I see them doing on the court, or also sitting down and talking about what their plans are for kind of like upcoming summers and what they're really trying to get out of it, and get them to understand that this tennis teaching might not be something that they're going to do for the rest of their lives, but that they are learning some things along the way, and whatever they learn will hopefully help them in the workplace afterwards.
And when you see that incredible work ethic, I mean, you have been teaching now for 17 years, well, let's say 25 kids a class, 4 to 5 classes a semester. How do you break down classrooms? And everybody needs a little bit something different. How hard is that for a teacher to make sure they're really taking care of all their kids and not just those 5 that are super motivated or those 5 that are really challenged, but how do they make sure those kids in the middle don't get lost too?
Speaking from someone who felt like he was in the middle for a good amount of his academic life, I feel like those are the ones who I kind of worry about the most. And so, as long as I'm able to set up a classroom atmosphere where the students know that I'm going to come to class prepared every day, I'm going to try to make sure that I'm the same person each day, whether it's a good day or a bad day for me. I just try to wake up and make sure that the classroom is very consistent over time, and make sure that those students know that I do care about all of them. Again, not the ones at the top, not the ones at the bottom who need a little extra help, because oftentimes those students find ways to, personally get in touch with me. But just to make sure that in that regular class, I'm engaging with each of the students, making sure that I'm reading their eyes, their faces, noticing that they're taking notes or not taking notes, making sure they know that I'm monitoring whether they're doing their homework or not. And I think if you're able to set up a system where the students know that I'm engaged and care about their learning process and care about the environment or the atmosphere of the classroom, usually everyone works pretty hard within the whole space, and ideally everyone knows that I care about them.
And let me ask you this question. You've got this incredible work ethic. You've worked 2 different jobs. You've also done a tremendous amount of tutoring. I know people seek you out for a tutor. You've also done a tremendous amount of individual tennis teaching, as well as running the Deerfield team, which has been one of the great state contenders from time to time. You've had state champions on your team. How do you maintain that work ethic, that motivation? What advice do you have for people to sort of maintain that drive and motivation, that energy level? How much recovery do you need? How do you look at those things?
I've got a little joke around the house that really all I need is a cup of coffee, a banana, turkey, and That's about it. Maybe a cutie from here and there. But I'm a fairly simple as far as what I try to do each day. I mean, I during the school year I make sure I get an early morning workout, and that really gives me a little bit of energy throughout the day. But what I really try to do, whether I'm in the classroom or whether I'm on the court, is just make sure that I'm as consistent as I can. I wake up and I'm ready to, work through the day, and nothing, bothers me and gets me too upset. And, I sometimes try to make sure that I don't get too excited about doing anything either. But again, I try to be as consistent as I can and try to wake up and make sure that I do that. And I think probably more importantly, and maybe this comes from tennis, is just making sure that I'm in the moment. There are days, and I know that anyone who works a lot sometimes looks at their day, they're like, oh my gosh, you have to work for 12, 14 hours or 10 hours or however intense it might be. But once you get into the moment, you kind of forget about the rest of the day and really just focus on that 1 hour increment, whether it's a 1 hour class, whether it's a 1 hour private lesson, whether it's an hour and a half group lesson, and just make sure that you enjoy that moment as much as you can. And if you enjoy those moments throughout the day, usually each day winds up turning out pretty well. And then you're ready to do the same thing the next day. And I try, if I can, to get a little bit of time here and there, although it's not a lot. But I do try to give myself a little bit of downtime.
And let me ask you a few more questions, and you don't have to answer these if they are too complex for your mathematically, athletically driven mind. The first question is the Grangers. Who is better, Ed or Mitch?
Oh my gosh, this is a tough one. Growing up, I only played against Ed, and he had the best backhand return from the ad side who I've ever played against. Took it earlier. He was the toughest guy to serve and volley against, and I think I mentally had to work harder than anything else. Mitch, on the other hand, can hit a huge ball, and someone who I've grown to respect over time because when I first met him, he was just a kid. But as I've played against him, he's had my number a couple of times. So at this point in my time, when I was a kid like Mitch, I was scared of Ed. Now being on the other side of it, I might be a little bit more scared of Mitch.
Well, you are generous to periodically let Mitch take a couple victories. That is very, very nice of you. Second question is, you have a chance to work with brilliant young students, brilliant young tennis players. And then you get stuck periodically with middle-aged athletes that at best you could call them athletes. People like the Blums and the Fields of the world. Is it hard to motivate when you get on the court with folks like that versus the great athletes, that you're used to teaching and playing with? Is it hard to then get up for that kind of for that kind of game or lesson or time on the court?
I think that I enjoy pushing all of them. I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed in the classroom. I've never only wanted to teach honors classes, and I really like the mix of being able to teach different levels. And I think secretly I enjoy the same thing on the tennis court. So if I can hit that ball a little bit farther away from that player who only feels like mediocrely running for the ball, or throw up a lob that's a little bit farther away from them, I think that's one thing that I secretly enjoy. And maybe I do enjoy a little bit of the pain of that person not getting to the ball, but hopefully inspiring them that when they get into a match, to make sure that they expend a little bit more effort and figure out a way to win a match for the team. So, but I do enjoy both.
And let me ask you another question based on that, and then I'll ask you another one. First is, there are certain partners that always blame their partner. And this is very popular in sports. It's very popular in law firms. We know somebody's going to be very successful in the law firm when they start to blame somebody else for everything. Oh, that person's got a future. And I say that jokingly. It's one of the most obnoxious qualities around. How often do you see that with both kids, with the parents of the kids, others saying, oh, you're pairing me with that kid. I would win if not for that kid. It's my doubles partner's fault. It's their fault. How often do you see some of that? And how do you discourage that?
I see that happening all of the time, and it's always something that kind of makes me giggle. And we talk about this idea, especially like in the high school realm, is that some people really help their friends and their doubles partner play better. And some people, based on how they act and how they behave and how they handle victory and how they handle defeat, really make that either bring out the best or the worst in their partners. And so it's something that we talk about as far as how they look at someone, how they react to someone, how they, we talk all the time about sometimes going up to someone and being like, oh my gosh, that was the worst shot I've ever seen. But then joke it off and just be like, hey, not a big deal. We'll go on and get the next one. And I try to do the same thing when I play matches. I know I did that a couple weeks ago in a match where I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you missed that backhand volley. What else do you want me to do out here? But then understanding that I'm going to make the same mistake. And as long as the delivery is handled the right way, I think it really brings out the best in everyone you're working with.
And a couple more questions. No, and this is hypothetical, and I'm asking for a friend. If you are getting close to 60-ish and slowing down one bit, and your life partner, she is a little bit younger, better shape, a better athlete, is there some point where you just stop playing tennis with her for just male ego reasons, or do you keep at it and try and keep on getting better and stronger and stay after it, even if she's getting stronger and a few years younger? How do you deal with that, Josh?
You know what? I think that what you have to do is you have to make sure that you maintain the normal lessons. But what you need to do is you need to make sure that you find some time for yourself to really, really work on your game. I know that some people are better listeners than others and are really good at taking advice from tennis pros. But I think that as long as you're willing to spend a little extra time and really work in your game and show that deliberate practice on the court, that you might be able to keep up with those other people who you unfortunately lose too many baseline games 11-7 to.
Well, hardly ever, but once in a while we lose. But I mean, that my friend loses. So two more questions. Now I'm going to take people like, Chad Eisenberg, Rob Salati, who are brilliant athletes, out of the equation, as well as, all these other brilliant tennis players. But if you have to choose a partner for a match, and you got to take an Evan Harwood or Derek Fish, where do you go with that decision, Josh? Where do you go with that? If that's too tough to answer, don't answer it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is like the toughest question of the day. I mean, I've spent so much time hitting with Evan and I've seen his game grow over the past couple of years that I love getting out with him on the court so I can make sure that I can, make his forehand and backhand just a little bit better in each of those matches and make sure he's closing in on the net, which he has improved on a ton over the past couple of years. Derek, on the other hand, is someone who puts you at ease and makes sure that everything out there is like super fun and light, and just seeing a guy who picked up the game in his late 20s and then all of a sudden he's one of the better players of the club is pretty fun to work with as well. So again, as I was telling you earlier, I like working with everyone, whether it's someone who's a little bit more serious on the court or someone who's a little bit more light and jovial out there.
No, I think a well-stated answer. And then one final question. The greatest tennis serve teacher in the greater area for the last 100 years, who's the best tennis serve teacher in the area?
I mean, the answer to that because he taught us both how to serve. So that would be Corky Leighton, my dad. I mean, he's the best. And, fortunately, he learned from his father and his grandfather. And I've tried to steal as much as I can to make sure that I'm able to apply those principles. But I'm also smart enough to make sure that my son is taking serving lessons from my dad rather than from me. So certainly give a shout out to my dad for all the people who have worked with him, whether it was with the serve, with the forehand, or anything in between over the past 50 years.
Also a brilliant strategist as well. And it's fascinating, too, because this is really the nature versus nurture thing. You heard Josh say it, that both of us took serving lessons from his father, Corky, but I can assure you those serves came out very differently, with Josh having a much stronger serve than myself, which is its own challenge and problem, et cetera, but might be partly mental. In any event, Josh Leighton, what a great pleasure to visit with you. One of the greatest of all time, as good as they come. Josh Leighton, brilliant math teacher, brilliant tennis leader, coach, et cetera. One of the best people we know. Thank you for joining us today on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.